Psalm 124 vers 8. Ons hulp kom van die Here wat hemel en aarde gemaak het. Kom ons bid saam. Here, ons loof en aanbid U. Ons kom na U wie ons bron van hoop is. Nou vra ons dat U ons aanbidding aanneemlik sal vind en ons in hierdie oomblik sal kom ontmoet. In die naam van Jesus vra ons dit. Amen. Genade en vrede vir julle van God ons Vader en die Here Jesus Christus en deur die werking van die Heilige Gees. Amen. Broers en susters, ons is dankbaar vir die voorreg om vandag saam as 'n geloofsgemeenskap die Here se naam te kan aanroep. Ons is oorstelp van vreugde, omdat ons op Vrydag 24 April Belgravia se 92ste bestaansjaar kon vier. Ons roep uit, soos die kerkhervormers uitgeroep het, Soli Deo Gloria, aan God alleen al die eer. Ja, al is ons geskei van mekaar, vier ons dit tog saam. En mag U as gesin 'n oomblik neem en reflekteer oor wat dit in U lewe beteken. Ons herdenk en vier al die rolspelers wat baanbreker werk oor die jare heen verrig het. Ons dink aan al ons oue vandag, maar ons vier ook die jeug en die kinders vandag. Ons dank ook al ons gemeentelede vir hulle onpatsigtige bydrae en ondersteuning wat hulle oor die jare heen getrou gegee het en wat ons in staat kon stel om al die uitdagings, selfs die uitdaging van vandag, te kan hanteer. Ons sien reikhalsend uit na 'n party wat ons almal saam gaan hou wanneer die maatreëls van die inperking en die afstand verwyder word. Ons gebed is dat U veilig bly en weet dat die Here vir U lief is, net soos ons ook vir U baie lief is. Amen.
Die naam van Jesus stem terug, want Hy verlos my van al my sonde en Hy maak my samsam. Want Hy verlos my, oh, van al my sonde en Hy maak my vry.
The scripture reading comes from Matthew chapter 10, verse 1 to 4. Jesus called his 12 disciples together and gave them authority to drive out evil spirits and to heal every disease and every sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, called Peter, and his brother Andrew, James and his brother John, the sons of Zebedee, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Patriot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. This is the word of the Lord.
Today we continue our sermon series, Developing Passionate Disciples. Last week we focused on a definition of what a disciple is. Today we will focus on selection. Who does Jesus choose to be a disciple? Selection is something we do every day. We select what we eat, what clothes we wear, what movie or channel to watch, what career we choose, in what field we will study. Yes, we even select what team to support. Yes, you make the choice. Nobody can force you to like Manchester United or the All Blacks. You make that decision for yourself. Selection comes as second nature to all of us. In the Gospel reading of Matthew chapter 10, verse 2 to 4, we see the names of the people selected by Jesus. The 12 apostles. And we will look closer to those two words, 12 and apostles. But Jesus selected Simon, whom he called Peter, Andrew, his brother, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee. They were all fishermen from Galilee. Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, and then we have Matthew the tax collector, who is also the author of our gospel. James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanian, and Judas, who betrayed Jesus. So let's look at these two words, 12 and apostle. I ask myself, 12, why 12? If you're going to do something like transforming the world, why only select 12? Why not 20 or even 120? Or why not 7? Because 7 is a good and perfect number in biblical reference. Why select 12? Well, the answer we'll find in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, God selected 12 tribes in Israel. And these 12 tribes were selected so they be a conduit or a channel to God's mercy and God's kindness and God's grace to the world. In Genesis 12, verse 3, we see God calls the 12 tribes saying, in you, that is in Israel, in you 12 tribes will all the families of the world be blessed. So you see, that was the job description for Israel in the Old Testament. But we all know that Israel failed miserably in upholding that promise of God. So Jesus comes in the New Testament and says, we're going to try this again, because it is in my heart to show kindness and love. And I show kindness and love through people. But now I will not choose 12 tribes like in Israel, but now I will choose 12 apostles. Only 12. This 12 is to establish God's program to reclaim and renew people's broken lives in the world. 12 signifies the new Israel, the new missional movement. 12 Jesus called apostles. So what is an apostle? An apostle in Jesus' context was a very important person. A Jewish rabbi would have apostles. The Hebrew word for apostle is shaliach, which means to send. A rabbi would send people, shaliach, or apostles, and they would represent the rabbi. There's a rabbinic saying that says, the shaliach speaks for the rabbi and represents the rabbi. The rabbi, he cannot be all over and everywhere. Why? The shaliach represents him. So, the rabbi sends the apostles or people called shaliach to love in his name, and to forgive in his name, and to be humble in his name, and to be kind in his name. So that's why we have 12. New Israel, a new missional movement to bless the world, and they represent Jesus. So if we see a shaliach, we see Jesus. If we see the apostles, we see Jesus, for they represent Jesus. Now we must also remember that in Jesus' context, rabbis in that century will make selection of people based upon the ability to follow 613 commandments. In the Old Testament, those 613 commandments is called the tradition of the elders. Jews today would call that the Mishnah. 613 commandments that you must follow to the letter in order for you to be selected. And when we look at the apostles of Jesus, none of them qualified. None of them knew the Mishnah. None of them were formally trained. None of them were leaders in the synagogue. None of them were traditional, followed the tradition of the elders. None of them were Levitical priests. So why select them? What do they have that Jesus selected them? Well, let's look closer to what the gospel tells us about these apostles of Jesus. We read that Simon, who we called by the nickname Petros, meaning rock, in all four gospels, if we consider all four gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we see that Jesus and Peter interacts at least 20 times. And Peter is corrected 18 times by Jesus in that 20 interactions they have. That's not good. But yet Jesus selected Peter to be one of his apostles. Then we have James and John. In the Aramaic language we call them Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. James and John we see in the Gospel of Luke chapter 9 where they ask Jesus to call to the heavens to cast down thunder and fire upon people that would not want to respond to the call of Jesus. These two sons of thunder, Jesus selected them to be his apostles. And there's Thomas. Thomas, we know where we get the common phrase, doubting Thomas. We read of his doubt in John chapter 21. Unless I see the scars on his hands and feet, and the scars where the spear pierced in his side, I will not believe. This doubter is part of the selected 12. And then we have Matthew. He identifies himself as a tax collector, which means he was a traitor of the people, because he was working for Rome and not for his own people. And Matthew, as a tax collector, was regarded as a person focused only on making profit. It doesn't matter who will suffer in the end. And then we have Simon the Canaanian, which means he belonged to a Jewish group called the Zealots. They were responsible for the killing of Roman soldiers. He believed in violence as a way to redeem the people of Israel. He is part of the elite 12 that Jesus selects. And then, of course, we have Judas, who betrayed Jesus with a kiss. On top of it all 12 of them, they were from Galilee, a place that was very insignificant in the first century. So I chose them. They did not qualify. They did not know the Mishnah. They had no sophistication. They had no connections, no governmental appointments. So why did Jesus selected these 12? I can give you 2 reasons why, and only 2 reasons why Jesus has selected them. And the first reason is when Jesus selects these men as disciples, they were available. When we look at the call in Matthew chapter 18 verse 20 of Simon Peter, his brother Andrew, they were fishermen doing their business with John and James in Galilee. Then Jesus told them, "Follow me." That shows how revolutionary Jesus was. And immediately they responded. They made no excuses. They were so captivated and mesmerized by the call of Jesus. They responded because they were available to the call of Jesus. And today, so many of us, so many Christians, they will make excuses. No, I must do this and do that. I must check my portfolio. I must check with my wife. They said nothing. They just dropped what they were busy with. These disciples were available. So God's selection is not based upon ability, But God's selection is based upon availability. We often hear people say, I don't have the ability. Well, God doesn't care about your abilities. For it's not about your ability, but about your availability. In the Old Testament, we see Moses was available. In Exodus 3, he says, Hineni, here I am, Lord. When God calls him, he brings deliverance for his people. We read about Samuel and his availability in 1 Samuel chapter 3, where he responds to the call of God saying, Hineni, here I am. We read of Isaiah, who says to the Lord, I'm a man of unclean lips and live among people of unclean lips. Isaiah is a spiritual mess, but God calls him. In Isaiah 6, we read his response. In Hebrew, he says, Hineni, here I am, Lord. Yes, God calls us not on our abilities, but he calls us on our availability. God calls you even right now as we journey during lockdown, during this period of difficulty. He calls you and me to note that his call is asking you to come and me to come. The Lord bless us in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
Goeiemôre dominee, susters, broeders, al ons kinders en jong mense, ek groet en wens vir u Gods vrede toe en dat u en die families en geliefdes veilig bly. Liewe gemeente, kom ons bid saam. O Heer ons God en Vader, nader tot God, nader tot u. Dankie dat u ons lewens vir nog 'n week uitgespaar het en vir die voorreg om voort te kan gaan met ons eredienste, om u te loof en te prys vir u genade en u liefde aan ons. Here, die ganse wêreld is tot verhaal geroep om opofferings te maak en te help om die coronavirus te beveg. 'n nuwe normaal. Here, dankie vir die onselfsugtige manier waarop ons mense gehoor gee aan die lockdown reëls. Baie van ons kon en steeds kan ons in lockdown tyd so benut om te besin en stille tyd met u te kan meemaak. En ja, Here, hoe bevredigend is dit dat u skepping weer 'n bietjie kan asemhaal met skoon lug en natuurlewe wat ons ervaar. Here, dankie vir gesondheidsdienste en alle noodsaaklike dienste. Ook ons landbousektor wat steeds daagliks ons land van voedsel voorsien. Dankie vir vroue en manne wat onselfsugtig en met oorgawe hulle diens lewer om ons gesond en veilig te hou. Here, dankie vir die breë geloofsgemeenskap, die NGO's en talle welwillendheidsstrukture wat in plek is om ons mense hoop te gee en selfs net om 'n kospakkie met iemand te deel. Liewe Here, terwyl ons land môre ons 26ste Vryheidsdag vier, kom sê ons dankie vir ons land Suid-Afrika en ons president vir die manier waarop hy ons land deur hierdie krisis lei. Ons bid vir u seën op sy lewe en dat u hom en sy span met insig en geloof sal toerus. Here, Volkskerk van Afrika Belgravia, vir 92 jaar het u ons geseën en gedra. Dankie. En ons gee alle eer aan ons leiers, elke suster en broeder wie 'n bydrae gemaak het sedert die bestaan van ons gemeente. Here, seën ons ouë vandag, ons kinders, ons jong mense en elke suster en broer. Here, en ook bring troos aan families wie geliefdes aan die dood moes afstaan. En so, Here, op die voorhand van nog 'n week, vra ons dat U ons help en versterk, daar waar siekte is, daar waar nood en honger, ja, en selfs onsekerheid is, Here. En dat ons kan vashou aan die woorde van Paulus, dat alles werk ten goeie, en dat niks ons kan skei van U liefde nie. Here, ons bid en vra alles in U groot en heilige naam, met baie danksegging. Amen.
Ontvang die seën van die Here en gaan in sy vrede. Die genade van ons Here Jesus Christus, die liefde van God ons Vader en die troostvolle gemeenskap met sy Heilige Gees, rus en bly met ons elkeen, van nou af tot in ewigheid. Amen.
The Lord bless you and keep you. Make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. As we receive, we agree. Amen.